It was the most divisive trial of 2024, a case that caused confrontations inside of the courtroom, outside the courthouse, and all over social media. Karen Reed is accused of running over her Boston police officer boyfriend, John O'Keefe, on purpose. Prosecutors charged her with second-degree murder, but Karen Reed has asserted her innocence, alleging a concerted effort by law enforcement to frame her. She contends O'Keefe was fatally injured inside a residence where his body was located, and authorities manipulated evidence to implicate her. Her first trial ended in a mistrial, with the jury unable to reach a unanimous verdict. Now, a new jury has been seated, and the prosecution, the defense, and the public are anticipating the start of the retrial of the century. Good evening and welcome to Closing Arguments. I'm Julia Janae, filling in for Vinnie Politan. It was almost exactly 1 year ago that those opening statements began in Karen Reed's first trial. You remember it. You probably watched it right here on Court TV, where prosecutor Adam Lawley laid out why the Commonwealth believed that Karen Reed committed second-degree murder when she backed her SUV into her boyfriend, who was a Boston police officer, John O'Keefe. And they also said that she drove away while he was in the snow, that she left him there to die. And when it was time for the defense to start, David Yannetti delivered those memorable first words to the opening. Karen Reed was framed, pointing the blame not at just the authorities who investigated this case, but individuals, off-duty officers who were inside of the 34 Fairview home that night. They also alleged that there was a cover-up from the investigators that were working this case, and this is a trial that ended up dividing a community. It was underway, and after 2 months of testimony, followed by closing arguments, the jury had this case. It took them 25 hours to deliberate and ultimately, after several notes, come back to Judge Beverly Cannoni and say they could not reach a unanimous decision on all of those counts. So what happened? It ended in a mistrial, hung jury, and now we're at it again. Just under 12 months later, we have now a new jury selected in the Karen Reed retrial. And while at the core, the facts remain the same in this case, a lot has changed. There's a new prosecutor leading the Commonwealth. There's a former juror that has joined the defense team this time around, and Karen Reed has been speaking out a lot. So what will it all mean for trial number 2? We have someone joining us now who has all of the latest, someone who keeps us on our toes for what's happening in Dedham, Massachusetts. Crime and Justice correspondent Matt Johnson is with us. Matt, tell us about this jury. We've got a new one and opening statements starting soon.
Julia, good evening. So this is a big day. I mean, this is the day that we've waited for, and the biggest day in this retrial, leading up to opening statements that are going to happen here at the courthouse behind me in Dedham, Massachusetts, 1 week from today. So more than 2,000 people in this community received those jury notifications. More than 600 people filed through this courthouse over the past 3 weeks. It took 10 days to seat this jury, and now we finally have the jury for the retrial. 18 people will be sworn in come Tuesday. Of those, the breakdown split right in the middle. Look at your screen. 9 men and 9 women. That includes all the alternates that will hear the case evidence. We'll hear who they are at the end of this process. Again, they'll be sworn in on Tuesday ahead of opening statements, after Easter and after the Boston Marathon, which is also on Patriots Day next Monday. Karen Reed, we asked her thoughts on the jury selection process and the jury that's seated. Take a listen to this. Karen, how do you feel about the jury being seated?
Stay. I'm pleased. We're loaded for bear, ready to get the show on the road, and we're happy with the whole process today.
Karen, how do
last 2 weeks.
How do you feel about Hank Brennan planning to use your interviews in his opening statement?
Come at me.
Because we're your dad.
You sound like your dad.
I may have seen it. I would not have said anything that I wouldn't say again.
Would you like to have more time than openings Tuesday? Did you guys originally hoping to get more time?
We're ready right now.
Are you happy with these jurors, these 9 men and 9 women?
Very pleased,
You've seen
absolutely.
Them
yep, and I believe they're
them?
truthful, and they were questioned thoroughly. So I have confidence in.
How will you be spending the weekend?
Do you think you might testify this night?
There'll be no comment.
Are you feeling confident about your case?
Always.
And any strategy you want to share?
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thanks.
Karen Reed and her defense team telling us that they feel very confident and happy with the 18 men and women that'll be hearing the case evidence. But remember, it's a very different mood out here in front of the courthouse, Julia, because Karen Reed, the defendant in all of this, is the only one that can speak on camera currently, because both prosecution and the defense team, all the attorneys involved in all of this, they remain under gag order.
Yeah, and that talking on camera is something that's actually going to be used against her in this case for those opening statements. Is there anything else that we can expect in those openings a week from today?
Right, so you said it right there, right? We are approaching this retrial of the century, and it's going to be a very different trial than what we saw this time last year, and we begin with those opening statements. So right away, there's new attorneys on both sides. We have the special prosecutor, Hank Brennan. We also have additional attorneys on the defense side. Last year, it was a face-off between Yannetti and Adam Lally, the ADA. This year, Hank Brennan, the special prosecutor now on the case, and Alan Jackson, defense attorney, they're going to deliver the opening statements. And the Commonwealth is planning to show some of the new evidence in this case that'll be before the jury right out the gate. They plan to show clips of Karen Reed speaking on camera and to the media, to various interviews and outlets. They filed this motion earlier, and it reads this in part. The Commonwealth notifies the court that it intends to introduce recorded statements of the defendant in its opening statements. Commonwealth also intends to play interview clips during the trial of this defendant, Karen Reed, and also her father, Bill Reed. He's done a number of interviews. Those could be played. He's on the witness list. Now, outside the courthouse, we asked him his thoughts and if he regrets making those statements. Take a listen.
Mr. Reed, you mentioned that this case is national now.
Yes.
Today, prosecutors filed a notice that they plan to use your daughter's statements as evidence against her and your interviews as well. How does that make you feel?
Come at me. I live by the truth. I answer to a higher maker. And I'll tell the entire truth. And there's nothing we are hiding in the Reed family.
And that's the same exact statement, if you recall, that Karen Reed, the defendant in all of this, gave us on the courthouse steps there when she was asked that very same question. One of the reporters said, "Hey, did you listen to your dad's answers?" And she said, "I may have." Oh, Julia?
Maybe they're sharing notes, Matt. I don't know. The way Karen Reed said it, though, it came across, come at me, bro, with her statement. Okay, so you asked the question. I don't think you got an answer from her on what she's going to do over the weekend, because she's got a week until opening statements. But I understand that there is a hearing before we actually get to opening statements.
Yeah, there's a long process, even though it's 1 week away. And Karen Reed, to answer your question there, she told me in the courthouse when we were going through security together, I asked her what she planned to do over the weekend, and she said that she's going to pray a lot, and they plan to go to church for Easter services. She's Catholic. And now, going back to your other question, tomorrow there's a big hearing, and we don't know exactly what is going to be argued, but all attorneys are required to be back here tomorrow. And some of the outlying things, the themes that haven't really been discussed in front of Judge Beverly Cannoni yet include what exactly can be played in opening statements of those interview clips. We could hear about that because that's very pertinent right now as we head into the weekend. And then also whether or not the text messages between Aiden Carney, known as Turtle Boy, a blogger, and Karen Reed, if those can come in as case evidence in her trial. Remember, he's being charged for witness intimidation. It's a separate case. She's not charged in that, but the judge in his case is allowing that to be passed over to Special Prosecutor Hank Brennan. Hank Brennan now needs to ask Judge Beverly Cannoni if he can introduce it in as case evidence for consciousness of guilt when we're at that stage of the trial. So all of that needs to be ironed out. And whether or not this new jury will be allowed to hear what happened after trial number one. What am I talking about? Well, the allegations of Trooper Proctor and what led to his firing, and also can they hear about the other law enforcement agencies and the other law enforcement personnel that were also disciplined that were part of the investigation. There's at least 3. So we're going to have to hear whether or not the defense can put that into evidence and before this jury.
So many details still to be ironed out, but Matt Johnson on the ground there with the big news of the day in the Karen Reed trial. We have a jury. Matt, thank you for everything. Let's bring in another group of people who have all the answers in this case. Joining us from Massachusetts, our Karen Reed Insiders panel. We have trial attorney Wayne Dennison with us, criminal defense attorney Joseph Krowski Jr., Karen Reed supporter Nick Rocco, and author of the book Storm of Suspicion, The Karen Reed Trials, Kevin Lenahan with us as well. Great to see you all this Tuesday evening. Wayne, let me start with you. Karen Reed says, come at me when it comes to this use of her statements, but I'm really wondering how you feel about the use of someone's media interviews post a first verdict against them in an opening statement. I mean, she's not admitting guilt in any of these interviews.
It's a remarkable set of circumstances where a criminal defendant decides to go on a media blitz and talk to everybody who will listen to her about what she thinks of the case. And there are some things that she said over the course of that, of her media interviews, that actually do play into the prosecutor's claims against her. So I think that those claims are going to come in, those statements are going to come in, and, you know, she's the defendant here. These are statements against her interest, and I cannot see that Judge Cannoni would limit the ability of the prosecution to play them.
Joseph, do you think we have enough jurors to get us through this process? Judge Cannoni deciding to have 9 men, 9 women. Of course, only 12 are going to deliberate. But what do you think about the breakdown and what we know so far about them?
So, look, typically in Massachusetts in Superior Court cases, we sit 4 alternates. So the fact that Judge Cannoni has sat 18 jurors, 6 alternates, that went through a very intensive screening out process, I think we've got enough. I think these jurors know the commitment that they're in for. The length of trial was forecast, and look, what can you say? Split right down the middle. 9 women and 9 men. I don't really know how the gender plays into this case and how people are going to view, how these jurors are going to view this evidence. It's going to be a much different trial than the last trial, and I think that come at me certainly was a little bit of calculated bravado. One of the things that I think where the government missed the mark on the first case was not presenting the statements of the defendant herself to the jury. Now there were unused statements in the first trial, but trial number 2, there's additional statements. The reason we don't see it a lot is because usually defendants avail themselves of that constitutional right to remain silent. There was a concerted effort and a strategy here to get her story out. And I think that she might end up regretting that decision despite her comments made in front of the courthouse today.
Yeah, you're right. A lot of bravado in that statement, and from her father. Curious as to how much of his interviews are going to be used in this trial if the judge admits them. Nick, you've got your finger to the pulse of Karen Reed supporters as they're getting ready. We don't see them. We're seeing video now from prior trials out in front of the courthouse, and normally we'd see them closer to the courthouse. Tell me about the latest with the buffer zone and whether or not you think supporters are more hopeful going into this retrial than the first trial.
So I'm on the end of the buffer zone. I believe it's now 300 feet. It's a little bit past the church. They did put some signage up that states where the buffer zone is. You're allowed to walk through it to get to the other side, but you can't have any pink on. You can't have any signs. People are still out there. She still has the same support, if not more than that she had in the first trial. It's very early. I think a lot of people are anticipating opening statements, and I think you're going to see a larger crowd outside on Tuesday when they do opening statements. But the support hasn't ended, and I only believe it's going to grow bigger for her.
After Patriots Day, after the Boston Marathon there in the area, they're all going to be showing up for those opening statements on Tuesday. We'll, of course, be there. Court TV, cameras inside. Kevin, there are a lot of changes, but it does seem like in this trial there are more changes to the prosecution's case. It's arguable one way or the other. There's a lot of changes on both sides. But what change do you think is going to be the most positive for prosecutors trying to get a verdict of guilty?
Well, it's hard to predict what we don't know. We know the state managed to get 8 gigabytes of new data, new vehicle data. We don't know what's in that. There's been indications of time and location, possibility that we know exactly what time John got out of the car. Supposedly, he got out of the car at 12:31, and we know that that's when the seatbelt was released. I think that was mentioned in a hearing. And if that proves to be accurate, that's powerful, because at 12:32 and a few seconds after that, John moved for the very last time. So it's powerful evidence. I think the biggest difference, though, we're going to see is just in a much more focused strategy where you go after the nuts and bolts evidence, which is incredibly powerful here. The physical pieces found in a debris field and at the house that belonged to the Lexus. The timeline that shows there was no time or no opportunity to get to that Lexus during the day and then plant it 3 feet down in the snow. The vehicle data, the GPS data that shows that John never went in the house, the tiny pieces of taillight plastic that were found laced into John's clothing, and the DNA. It's going to be a more focused strategy.
We're going to talk about that strategy. We do have to get to a break, though. The think tank is staying with us. We're going to look at what prosecutors say happened the night John O'Keefe died, give you a preview of what we expect to see on opening statements on Tuesday, coming up in a week. But plus, here's a preview of what's coming up in the next hour here on Vinnie Politan Investigates. Tonight on Vinnie Politan Investigates, doomsday cult mom and convicted killer Lori Vallow Daybell now representing herself in the trial of her fourth husband Charles Vallow's murder. He was shot and killed by Lori's brother Alex after an altercation, but did Lori instigate the fight? We investigate.
Daybell,
already convicted for the murders of her children.
Doomsday cult mom is now lawyer Lori.
she's representing herself.
On charges of conspiring to murder her fourth husband.
She said, I can murder you now.
She really thinks she's equipped to try this case.
She appears very sure of herself.
I have real trial experience.
It's going to be a strange trial. We'll see how it plays out.
The Cult Mom Conspiracy Trial. Live coverage weekday mornings, only on Court TV.
I did notice something out of the ordinary, like a black blob in the ground by the flagpole.
Karen brings us to the back of the car and she says, look, see, I have a cracked taillight.
And where on the vehicle was she directing yourself and Miss Roberts' attention?
The back right.
So the passenger side, rear part of the vehicle?
Yes.
And when you looked at that area of the vehicle, what could you see at that?
I saw that there were missing pieces, but there was also snow covering it.
The only response that I was personally given was just, I hit him, oh my God, I hit him.
But I can tell you today with 100% clarity, she said, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him.
Those are some of the witnesses who testified against Karen Reed in the first trial. And no doubt we'll hear most or all of them at this second trial. But what those witnesses say sometimes doesn't always line up with the other. So what do prosecutors say about the physical evidence in this case? Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas is breaking it down.
Let's take another look at the crime scene and what the prosecution says happened leading up to John O'Keefe's death. Now, what we're looking at right here, right now, is the Albert home, the home of the Alberts where the alleged altercation, according to prosecutors, took place. And it's also where John O'Keefe's body was eventually found after midnight in January of 2022, somewhere in this area. Now, of course, if he was found right here, as prosecutors allege, there was taillight evidence, there was blood evidence, and evidence of the cocktail glass that prosecutors allege that Karen Reed had at the time of O'Keefe's death, at the time that they say she backed into him. But let's advance the video just a little bit more to get a fuller scope of the street view of the Albert home. So let's pause it right here. And again, to give more reference, near this flagpole is where prosecutors allege that his body was found. But what's important to note about this, as we look at this street, they say that Karen Reed would have had to reverse from this way right here at approximately 22 miles an hour to hit John O'Keefe with enough force to kill him and eventually throw him over into this snow, into this ditch. So 22 miles an hour from this way, hitting John O'Keefe at some point in this area for him to be found right here after midnight on that night. So this is all what happened at the Albert home. Let's move a little forward to what Karen Reed was doing that night before her and O'Keefe got back to the Albert home, the evidence of her drinking that night. So we see her here. Let's pause the video. we see her sitting here, we see John O'Keefe here, and everyone else that was allegedly involved in what she claims to be a cover-up. But important to note, right here where Karen Reed's sitting, plenty of alcoholic beverages, beers, cocktail glasses, the whole nine right here where she was sitting. So she was obviously drinking out with her friends. This is what was going on before they got back to the Albert home. We can play the video just for a little bit more. Just again, this right here, the highlighted woman, this is Karen Reed, John O'Keefe standing right next to her, and everyone else allegedly involved in whatever happened that night. Now, after they left McCarthy's bar, prosecutors say that they have video of Karen Reed driving around in the area. And we see right here, let's pause it. This is her SUV, the SUV that was allegedly involved in John O'Keefe's death, her black Lexus, going down the street in this area. And again, another traffic camera catches her right here. Let's pause it. Right here, just in case you couldn't see, high beams on, coming down the road in the area. Now, another important thing to note, we can go back to the Albert home, back to where John O'Keefe was found, because we want to talk about and see where the plastic was found in the snow, that plastic evidence that he was found in the area where John O'Keefe was found. Now, again, blood evidence, plastic, glass, but let's take a look at some of that plastic that was found in the snow by police, the plastic fragments from Karen Reed's taillight. Let's pause it right here. So we see this, we see a little red piece of plastic right there, we see a little red right there, faint. Now, authorities say they took some of these pieces, put them all together for a bigger piece to eventually fill in a big hole in the back of Karen Reed's SUV, right here. Let's pause it right there. On her passenger side taillight of that black Lexus that we just viewed on the traffic cams.
That taillight, it's a pretty controversial piece of evidence, and it's arguably as strong for the prosecution as it is for the defense because they dispute how it ended up in the snow. Still with us in Massachusetts, we have our Karen Reed Insiders panel with us, Wayne Dennison, Joseph Krowski Jr., Nick Rocco, and Kevin Lenahan. Joseph Krowski Jr., let me start with you. This taillight, the prosecution, do you think this time around, with the new special prosecutors going to be doing the opening and going to be handling a lot of the examination in this case, do you think they're going to present the taillight evidence differently this time around?
Well, I think the entire prosecution is going to be presented differently. This is a data-driven case. The evidence, the forensic evidence, is not only sufficient, it's ample and abundant. In the first trial, some of that got lost because the Commonwealth, in my opinion, chased the conspiracy theory and tried to get too out in front of it, rather than just focusing on the essential elements of the crimes charged. Look, Karen Reed was the last person seen with John O'Keefe. There is direct evidence and circumstantial evidence of John O'Keefe getting into her car, driving to that scene. It's not just a theory. The tech stream data has her backing up 60 feet at approximately 24 miles an hour, right in close proximity to where John O'Keefe was found, to where fragments from her taillight were found, to where pieces of shattered glass were found, to where a sneaker was found, to where his body and some droplets of blood were found. The taillight there is captured in video surveillance throughout that morning, all clearly depicting a damaged taillight. Also corroborated by her statements that really didn't fit what was going on, telling Jennifer McCabe and Kerry Roberts that she had damaged the taillight, but was unclear how she did it. And that's where the statements come in, including the statement from her father where she said she thinks she hit something. That taillight's a compelling piece of evidence. And if you listen to the juror that was on court TV before, they didn't buy the argument it was planted. If you don't believe that taillight was planted, the second charge, the OUI manslaughter, is essentially over. They've got everything they need there, including now her filling in the blanks with her statements. You might remember with some of the statements she has now said she admits to drinking to such an extent and level where her judgment was impaired. One of the essential elements of the crime charge, the OUI manslaughter charge. So yeah, that that's going to remain a focal point.
Oh, yeah, we're going to talk about the drinking, but I want to stick with the taillight and ask you this, Nick. When it comes to why the taillight is important, Joseph really laid out what the prosecution says happened with this taillight, but in terms of what the defense is doing with this taillight, they use it as something completely different. With the problems in this case, in terms of what supporters who believe in what Karen Reed has said about this, where do they rank the taillight? Is this high on the list of problems with this case, or is it more on the lower side?
Well, I think the taillight is the #1 issue with this case, because that's what they're saying is the murder weapon was her vehicle. So they're basically same story that they had before was when you look at her leaving John's driveway, her vehicle is not completely damaged, and it does not look like the same condition it is in when the Massachusetts State Police had it. So how did all of that red taillight come off after 5:08 in the morning if she allegedly hit John earlier that morning around 12:32 what the Commonwealth is saying? How did more red pieces get off? And the only way more red pieces could have gotten off that car from the time they took the vehicle in Dayton to the time they brought it back to Canton was someone had to have taken those pieces off and brought them over to the scene, because none of those pieces were found at 6:08 in the morning when the Canton PD was there in 2 inches of snow. They happened to find a clear piece of glass, but they couldn't find red pieces of taillight in the snow, only 2 inches. Those would have been sticking out of the snow. So it's very interesting that 12 hours go by, 2 feet of snow comes down, then all of a sudden they find all these pieces of red taillight when they couldn't have found them earlier in the morning.
Kevin, let's talk about the drinking. We have all of these bottles and cups sitting in front of her. Clearly, they're bar hopping. That's not disputed. But do you think the prosecution leaned into the drinking enough? Or did they lean away from it because they wanted to go after that top charge of second-degree murder?
Yeah, I think they just meticulously and matter-of-factly proved it from 3 ways. You got the video surveillance showing her consuming the drinks. You have the bar tab. And then you have the blood alcohol taken next morning when she was at the hospital, which they're able to scientifically extrapolate it backward and get an estimate as to what her blood alcohol was at the time of, say, around midnight. So I don't, and that goes to if she's convicted just on the second charge, the OUI is absolutely critical, and it makes a huge difference in the sentencing. So, and I just want to mention quickly on the taillights. Nick's kind of changed the story that he's been going with for the last couple of years, and that the defense went with in their closing arguments last year when they showed a picture of the taillight in the driveway. They said, this is only cracked. Now, only in the last week, he suddenly changed to say, well, yes, it was missing pieces, but it looks a little different than it was what we saw in the Sally report. And as far as the pieces that weren't found in the snow, something that people have to understand is those pieces were found primarily inside a snowbank. So you had 2 feet of snow on top of a snowbank, and the state police described digging down 3 feet down. Those pieces were not around John's body, and they never were going to be found by the Canton police because the Canton police never took a shovel to the crime scene.
Yeah, solo cups instead. Wayne Dennison, Kevin mentioned the video, the Sally port, where the Lexus was, and we had that issue of it being inverted. That was this bombshell moment in the first trial. Is it going to change how things go in the second trial now that a lot of those issues have been aired out?
Well, in the first trial, that whole inversion thing was inexplicable. You couldn't come up with a reason why they would present it in the way they did. You're going to get a reason this time. You're going to get some explanation of why this was shown the way it was. And quite frankly, it's going to be shown in the manner in which it was supposed to be shown. I think it's still going to be controversial, given the notion that Trooper Proctor and others walked immediately behind the taillight.
Oh, Trooper Proctor. On that note, let's get to a break, because we are going to be talking about the defense, and they are going to want to bring up a lot about Trooper Proctor, but who's going to call him? Our think tank is going to stay with us. When we come back, we're going to focus on the defense and their case in advocacy of Karen Reed.
You see this first search that says hostile to dying cold?
I do.
What's that time?
You've got the, it's right over at 2:27.
AM or PM?
AM.
Ms. McCabe, you made that search at 2:27 a.m. because you knew that John O'Keefe was outside in your sister's lawn dying in the cold, didn't you?
Absolutely not. I did not make that search at that time, no.
You realized the next morning, after John was discovered, after 6 a.m., that you had an incriminating search on your phone, didn't you?
Absolutely not.
To cover your tracks, you searched it again in order to overwrite the original search at 2:27, correct?
Again, absolutely not.
How long to die in the cold? Of course, that means how long to die in the cold. It's a Google search that got the ball rolling for the defense. It galvanized support for Karen Reed and had everyone else wondering what exactly happened to John O'Keefe. Welcome back. I'm Julia Janae here for Closing. About the theory behind Karen Reed's defense. What can we expect in those opening statements that we now know we're going to begin next week on Tuesday? To help us answer that, let's bring back in our think tank, our Massachusetts insiders, Wayne Dennison, Joseph Krowski Jr., Nick Rocco, and Kevin Lenahan. Nick, let me start with you. What can we expect from the defense? Day one, opening statements, what do you think will be different that people can look for?
Well, first off, right off the rip, you have Alan Jackson doing the opening statements. I think he's going to make sure the jury understands what reasonable doubt is. In any portion of this case, if there is reasonable doubt, you have to find Karen Reed not guilty. And there are mountains of reasonable doubt in this case. One of the things you had mentioned was, they don't want to talk about Michael Proctor and the repercussions that he had. But all that's doing is hiding the truth from the jury. Same with the ARCA experts about who hired them. That's just hiding the truth from the jury. So I think one thing they're going to lay out to the jury is pay attention to what is not being allowed in the sense of objections and so forth, because the defense is still going to put out the same case that they did. I'm hoping Hank Brennan doesn't object to as much stuff as Adam Lally did, because there's no reason to hide the truth. Let it all play out, and the jury will ultimately come to a decision at the end of this. But I don't see throughout this whole case the outcome being different than the first trial.
That Google search, Kevin, Hoslong to dying cold, Jennifer McCabe, if it happened at 2:47, that's great for the defense. If it happened at 6 a.m., that's great for the prosecution. We have two experts who say differently for both sides. Have any of the jurors that have come out or talked about this case said that actually impacted them at all, or did they just discard it, or do we know?
I'm not aware of any, and I think the 227 search now is basically like the snuffleupagus. It's just not real. It's been debunked by so many different angles. You don't have to be a tech expert to understand this. So Jen McCabe's version of the story was that Karen, while they were sitting on the cruiser and the first responders were trying to revive John, her version is that Karen asked her to make a search to the effect of how long would it take someone to die in the cold. Well, we learned during the trial that Karen, after a half hour later, when she was on the ambulance, as she was being section 12'd, asked the paramedic more or less the same exact question, which fully corroborates Jen McCabe's version of the story. In addition, you just have the logic of the idea that Jen and Matt go home knowing that their friend is going to be killed, put out on the lawn after having been mauled by a dog and beat up, and they're just going to casually go home, tuck their four girls into bed, and then just make this. Jen is Googling her basketball coach, her daughter's basketball coach, and communicating with her. And by the way, she just casually, what time is my friend going to die? What time is this murder conspiracy that I am now complicit in by not going to the police? It just doesn't make any logical sense. And I have a hard time respecting people that know all the evidence that believe in it, to be honest.
Well, let's talk about the retrial, Wayne. In terms of us going into this retrial, new prosecutor, different defense attorney giving the opening statement than the first time around, typically speaking, when you have a retrial, who has the advantage, and who do you think has the advantage going into this one?
I think the prosecution has the advantage going into this one. The various very effective cross-examinations will be much harder to do. My biggest issue with the prosecution witnesses in the last trial was the lack of preparedness. And I think every single one of these witnesses is going to be prepared. And I think the prosecution has a real advantage going forward. in this case.
Joseph, you mentioned that perhaps the prosecution this time around won't front load their case with focusing on debunking the conspiracy, calling everyone who is inside of the house. Do you think they call Michael Proctor? Do they have to, or do they risk letting him be called in the defense case?
It's not a risk. They don't need to call him. They can prove the case. They can establish all of the elements of the charges without Michael Proctor. Michael Proctor typically was not alone. There was always one of his colleagues with a CPAC unit with him. And not only is it not a risk, it's an advantage, because if the defense then chooses to call Michael Proctor, the Commonwealth is able to, in a leading fashion, cross-examine him. And it's a much cleaner and succinct way of getting information to the jury. So we're going to hear about Michael Proctor. If the Commonwealth doesn't call him, I presume that the defense will. But to go back to the question that you had asked, Wayne, you know, that was a fairly dramatic moment in the first trial. It never comes out the same in the second trial. Almost everyone's heard that cross-examination. Proctor will be more prepared for those questions, and it's going to be, the impact is going to be blunted. No doubt about it.
I am surprised to hear you say that you think the prosecution isn't taking a risk in not calling Michael Proctor, and the jury wondering why they may have been hiding such a controversial witness. But let's switch to another topic, because we will have a lot of witnesses in this case, some that we have seen before. We know that Karen Reed arrived at 34 Fairview around the same time as one witness, Ryan Nagel, who was supposed to be there to pick up his sister from the Albert house. Now, Nagel was in a pickup truck with two friends, and he says that Karen Reed's SUV stopped in front of the Albert house, and then he parked behind her to wait for his sister, and this was for an extended period of time. Here at Court TV, we created a visual representation of what he described. According to Ryan's testimony, there were no cars between his and the SUV, the Lexus SUV that Karen Reed was driving, and Ryan didn't see anyone get out of the vehicle. He didn't see anyone out on the lawn, and he says Karen Reed was in the SUV alone. Listen for yourself.
When you stop in front of the driveway, about how far away from you is the black SUV that you saw?
Probably a car or a car length in front of me, a car length and a half in front of me.
And as you're sitting behind that, what, if anything, was in between the truck, Ricky's truck, and the black SUV in front?
There was nothing, sir.
And at any point in time that you were there in front of the house, did you observe anybody get out of that truck? I mean, get out of the SUV?
No, sir, I did not.
All the taillights were intact?
To my acknowledgement, yes.
You noticed no damage on any of the taillights?
Not to my acknowledgement, no.
At any point, did you see that SUV reverse and hit a pedestrian?
Objection. Sir.
I'll allow that. You didn't see that, right?
No, sir. I observed that there was a person inside the car with the interior light on.
And that would be sort of a dome light, is that right?
Correct, sir, yes.
Could you see where the dome light was, as far as in the left, right, or center of the vehicle?
I was in the center. It seemed like she was looking straight ahead with her hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel.
Now, as far as the other, what, if anything else, did you see, or who, if anyone else, did you see within the interior of the vehicle at that time?
I only saw one person at the time.
If the taillight wasn't cracked, this means it was before the altercation. If you're not seeing John O'Keefe, then could that mean he was inside of the house? Kevin, how do you explain not only Ryan Nagel, but then the other two people inside of his vehicle, his girlfriend and his friend who testified, saying that they don't remember seeing, or they did not see John O'Keefe, but Karen Reed was in that SUV?
Well, we have the GPS data from John's phone, which is truly very accurate. And it shows that the car actually only stopped, Karen's car, in front of the driveway for about maybe 10 or 15 seconds. It really wasn't there very long. And then it moves to the far end of the driveway, and John's phone reaches the last GPS position that it would ever reach. So Ryan Nagel is parked further back, seeing her parked about, I've measured it to be about 70 to 80 feet up. So they really weren't parked behind her for more than a few seconds. And then as they're driving away, you know, it's hard to really, we can't say what we're going, it's hard to address testimony about what something didn't see. You know, I mean, he's not paying attention. He has no reason to be paying attention to what's going on in that car. And all he remembers the next day or days later when he talks about it is a vague memory of seeing Karen sitting in the passenger seat. Now, I think there's a good chance that as they were driving away, that's when John had just got out of the car. But we can't know for sure at this point. Or we might know more from the vehicle data.
Nick, why do we believe, in terms of the defense, why do we believe these three people and not all of the other people who the defense says they're involved in the conspiracy, they all conspired together? Why not these three as well?
Well, one of the things that they said, which is very important, all three of them said that they did not see John O'Keefe on the lawn, nor did they see John in the vehicle. No witness that came out of the house saw John on the lawn. Nobody places John O'Keefe on the lawn except Julie Nagel 6 months later said that she sees a black blob. Then during trial says that she sees a 6-foot black object on the lawn. So nobody saw John O'Keefe on the lawn. And I know, you know, people say, oh, well, you can't, if you're not looking for it, you're not going to see it. But when you're backing out of that driveway, it's not like you're speeding by 32 miles per hour. You're driving by very slowly. Ryan Nagel said he's looking back to make sure his sister gets back in the house, so he has a clear view into the car. All three of them have a clear view into the car. They see only one person in the vehicle. So if he's not in the vehicle and he's not on the lawn, there really is only one place he could be, and it would be inside the house.
That's the allegation of the defense. We're going to see the prosecution and the defense on display on Tuesday for those opening statements. Court TV will be inside of that courtroom with our cameras and our own Matt Johnson. Thank you so much to the think tank for being here on this Tuesday evening to talk about this case. Wayne Dennison, Joseph Krosky Jr., Nick Rocco, and Kevin Lenahan. We are going to take our break, but when we come back, we'll reveal something else you need to know, plus coming up in the next hour on VPI. Prosecutors say Lori Vallow Daybell conspired with her brother Alex Cox to kill her fourth husband, Charles Vallow, so she could be with the so-called doomsday prophet, Chad Daybell. After Charles's death, Chad's wife was murdered, and the two ran off to Hawaii with a bag of money. So tonight, we're asking, why isn't Chad charged with Charles's murder?
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates. Coming up next, only on Court TV.
The entire family was slaughtered.
I tried to get them out. I wish to God it had never happened.
That's not really how God works, is it?
Interview with a Killer. New episode, Sunday at 8 on Court TV.
Now it's time for us to reveal something else you need to know tonight. Let's put it up on the big screen. In Harford County, Maryland, a jury found Victor Martinez-Hernandez guilty in the rape and murder of Rachel Morin. She was a 37-year-old mother of 5. Rachel was jogging on the Monpaw Trail in Bel Air, Maryland in August of 2023 when she was attacked, her body badly beaten, and was discovered shortly after. Victor Martinez-Hernandez was in the country illegally, linked to her murder through DNA evidence. And yesterday, after less than an hour of deliberations, a jury found him guilty on all counts, including first-degree premeditated murder, first-degree rape, third-degree sexual offense, and kidnapping. Prosecutors are expected to ask the judge for consecutive sentences, which could mean more than life without parole for the convicted killer. Martinez-Hernandez will learn his fate at a sentencing hearing. We don't have an exact date yet. Court said it will be held within 60 and 90 days of today. And we have to leave it there, but before we end this hour, there's a picture that I need to show you. Very important. This is Armando Martinez. Armando is 16 years old and is missing. He was last seen in Elizabethport, New Jersey, and Armando may be in need of medical attention. If you have any information about where Armando is, please call the Elizabeth Police Department, that number on your screen. You can also call 911 or 1-800-THE-LOST. Let's see if we can get Armando to a safe place tonight. Don't go away, though. We have another hour of live true crime on Vinnie Politan Investigates coming up next.